My family tried to rob me. While I was gone, they picked the wrong house.
My name is Mary, and I'm 35 years old. I'm a trauma surgeon, which means I'm trained to walk into blood, panic, broken bones, screaming families, and still know exactly what must be done first. But nothing in an operating room prepared me for the sound I heard when I came home early that afternoon. My daughter was sobbing inside my own house, the kind of terrified cry that makes a mother stop breathing before she even understands why. I pushed the front door open wider and froze just long enough to see the truth. My father was in my living room, yelling threats at a child, while my older sister was tearing through my bedroom like a thief who already believed she deserved everything she touched. Drawers were open. My mother's old jewelry box was missing from the dresser. Papers from my file cabinet were scattered across the hallway. Someone had searched for the deed, the apartment documents, and the blue folder I kept locked away for a reason. For 1 second, the surgeon in me tried to triage the scene. Child first, exit second, threat third, evidence fourth. The mother in me wanted to run straight at them. Instead, I stepped back into the shadow beside the hallway, pulled out my phone, and dialed 911 without making a sound. When the operator answered, I whispered, "My family broke into my house. They're threatening my daughter. Send police now." Before I tell you what they were really searching for, and why the sirens outside ruined far more than their afternoon, tell me, what time is it for you right now? Where are you watching from? And what's the weather like where you are? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. The operator told me to stay on the line, and I did, even though every instinct in my body screamed at me to rush into that room. My daughter Emma was only 8 years old. She was brave in the way children try to be brave when adults terrify them. Silent, stiff, trying not to make things worse. My father, Charles, stood over her with one hand braced on the wall, blocking the hallway as if my home belonged to him. My older sister, Rachel, was in my bedroom, dumping dresser drawers onto the floor and muttering curses under her breath. I heard the wooden scrape of my nightstand hitting the wall, then the sharp crack of something fragile breaking. "Tell me where your mother keeps the blue folder," Charles snapped. "Don't act stupid. You've seen it." Emma cried harder. "I don't know." "She's lying," Rachel called from my room. "Mary always hides things. Jewelry, contracts, bank papers. She thinks she's better than us." My hand tightened around the phone. I was still half hidden behind the hallway corner, and the operator could hear enough to understand I was not exaggerating. In the operating room, panic kills people faster than injury. I forced myself to breathe slowly. I checked Charles's hands. No weapon. I checked Emma's distance from him. Too close. I checked Rachel's bag on my bed. Heavy. Open. My mother's pearl necklace was already inside it. That necklace had been left to me in my mother's will, along with a small share in an apartment building she had quietly invested in years before she died. Charles had always called it family property, even though the paperwork said otherwise. Rachel had always called it unfair, even though she had received her own inheritance and burned through it within 3 years. I had helped them more times than I wanted to admit. I paid Charles's property taxes once when he said he was about to lose his land. I gave Rachel money for a divorce attorney when she swore she would pay me back. I covered medical bills, car repairs, hotel stays, emergency loans that were never emergencies after the check cleared. I even missed Emma's school recital once because Charles called me in tears, saying the bank was about to take everything, only for me to learn later he had used part of the money on a hunting trip. Each time, I told myself love meant patience. Each time, they learned my guilt had a dollar amount. But I never signed over my house. I never signed over my apartment shares. I never gave them access to the trust I had created for Emma. And now I understood why they had waited until my hospital schedule said I would be gone until evening. They did not come to ask. They came to corner my child, steal what they could, and force me to surrender the rest. Charles lowered his voice, but that made it worse. Listen to me, little girl. Your mother is selfish. If she loved this family, she would help us. If she doesn't sign those papers, people are going to lose everything. Emma whispered, "Please don't yell." That was the moment something inside me went completely still. Not calm, not peaceful. Surgical. Precise. I had seen families collapse in waiting rooms when fear made them cruel, but this was not fear. This was a plan. Rachel came out of my bedroom holding a stack of documents. Found copies of the apartment agreement, but not the transfer certificate. She must have moved it. Charles cursed. Then we make her sign new ones. Rachel laughed, bitter and breathless. You think she'll sign after this? She will if she wants her daughter to stop being scared. The operator's voice came quietly through my phone. Officers are on the way. Are you safe? I whispered. Not yet. Then I lifted the phone just enough to keep recording and stepped closer to the living room entrance. I could see the whole room now. My daughter trapped beside the bookshelf, my father pacing like a man rehearsing a threat, my sister holding papers that represented years of my work. For the first time, I did not ask myself how they could do this to me. I asked myself what kind of mother I would be if I let them do it to Emma too. When I stepped into the living room, Emma saw me first. Her face changed so fast it nearly broke me. Hope, shame, fear, relief, all of it flashed across her eyes before she tried to stand. Charles spun around. "Mary!" he barked, as if I was the intruder. Rachel appeared behind him with my mother's necklace in one hand and my property folder in the other. For 1 second nobody moved. Then I said, "Emma, come to me." Charles shifted like he wanted to block her, and I raised my phone. "Don't." He looked at the phone, then at my face. "Are you recording us?" "Yes." Rachel's expression twisted. "You psycho. You're recording your own family?" "No," I said. "I'm recording 2 adults who broke into my house, stole jewelry, threatened my daughter, and searched for legal documents they had no right to touch." Charles took 1 step toward me. "Careful how you talk to your father." The sentence might have worked on me 10 years earlier, maybe even 5. Back then, I still believed respect meant obedience. I still believed helping family meant bleeding quietly so they could call it love. But when I saw Emma hiding behind my leg, shaking so hard her fingers dug into my scrubs, every old rule died. "You are not in charge here," I said. "This is my house. Those are my documents. That is my child." Rachel threw the folder onto the coffee table. Papers slid across the glass. "Your house, your documents, your child. That's always the problem with you. Everything is yours." "Because I worked for it." Charles laughed, but his face had gone pale around the mouth. "You think being a doctor makes you untouchable? We made sacrifices for you." "You made loans out of my guilt," I said. "And I paid them until I finally learned the difference between helping and being hunted." Rachel's eyes flickered. She had not expected that. Neither had Charles. For years, I had answered their insults with explanations. I had defended my schedule, defended my savings, defended why I could not keep paying for emergencies that never ended. But that day, standing between my daughter and the people who had taught me to fear disappointing them, I felt no need to explain my life. I looked at the folder on the table and saw exactly what they had found. Apartment records, insurance papers, old tax copies, and a blank transfer form I had kept, only because my attorney had told me never to throw away anything connected to the estate. But something else was missing. My spare key. The one that had been hidden in the kitchen drawer was gone. "How did you get in?" I asked. Charles crossed his arms. "Don't start. How did you get into my locked house?" Rachel's lips pressed together. I looked at her bag. "You took my spare key when you came over for Emma's birthday." She snapped. "That's not the point." "It is now." Charles slammed his hand on the coffee table so hard Emma flinched. My arm went around her immediately. "Sign the papers," he growled. "Rachel's lender needs collateral, and my land is already tied up. If you transfer your apartment share temporarily, we can fix everything." "Temporarily," I repeated. "Is that what you call forging my name?" His eyes narrowed. Rachel said too quickly, "Nobody forged anything." I turned my phone so they could see the active call timer. "Police are coming." For the first time, silence hit the room. Outside, faint but growing, sirens began to cut through the Montana air. Charles's face changed from rage to calculation. "Mary, listen to me. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you overreacted." Rachel stepped closer, suddenly softer, suddenly desperate. "Please, you don't understand what this will do to us." I almost asked what terrifying a child would do to Emma, but I already knew they would not care until the consequences reached their own doorstep. "You still think this is about what happens to you?" I said. Charles lowered his voice. "You are making a mistake you can't undo." I looked at my daughter, then at my sister's bag, then at my father standing in the center of the home I had built after years of double shifts and grief. "No," I said. "For once, I'm going to tell the truth." The sirens stopped so close that the windows trembled. Charles moved first, not toward the door, but toward me. He reached for my wrist, and I stepped back just as the front door opened behind him. Two officers entered with the kind of calm authority that makes guilty people suddenly remember manners. "Police," one of them called. "Everyone stay where you are." Charles released the space between us like it had burned him. Rachel shoved my mother's necklace deeper into her bag, but one officer saw it. I saw him see it. That tiny movement became the first crack in their performance. "Officers," Charles said, lifting both hands in a wounded, fatherly gesture, "this is a family disagreement. My daughter is tired from work. She's emotional." I almost laughed. Emotional. That was always the word men like him used when a woman stopped obeying. Officer Williams looked at me. "Ma'am, are you the caller?" "Yes, my name is Mary. This is my home." My father and sister entered without permission, searched my bedroom, stole jewelry, threatened my daughter, and tried to pressure me into signing property documents. Rachel exploded. "That is a lie." Emma pressed her face into my side. I kept one hand on her shoulder and held out my phone with the other. "The 911 call is still connected. I also recorded the last several minutes." Charles's eyes turned cold. "Mary." One word. A warning. Officer Williams stepped between us. "Sir, do not speak to her right now." The second officer, Thompson, asked Rachel to put her bag on the floor. She refused. He asked again. Her hands shook as she dropped it. When he opened it, the living room went silent in a way I will never forget. My mother's pearl necklace, 2 rings, my spare key, a folded transfer form, a notary stamp that did not belong to anyone in my house, several pages with my name already typed into signature lines. Officer Thompson's jaw tightened. "Whose documents are these?" Rachel looked at Charles. Charles looked at the floor. That was all the answer anyone needed. The officers separated us. Emma and I were moved toward the kitchen while Rachel started crying, but not from guilt, from being caught. Charles tried a different mask. "I'm a grandfather," he said. "I was trying to protect my family from financial ruin." Officer Williams replied, "By threatening a child?" Charles's face hardened. "You don't understand our situation." "I understand what I heard on the call," the officer said, "and I understand what is in that bag." Rachel shouted, "Mary set us up." That sentence almost made me smile because the truth was so much better. I hadn't set them up. I had simply stopped covering for them. My house had cameras because Rachel had once borrowed a bracelet and insisted I must have misplaced it. My locks had logs because Charles had a habit of showing up when I was at work. My attorney had digital copies because people who demand trust the loudest are often the reason you need records. Officer Thompson asked Emma if she was hurt. She shook her head but whispered, "He said Mom would lose the house if I didn't tell." That was the sentence that ended Charles's performance. The officers cuffed him first. He fought it with words, not fists, which somehow made him look smaller. "Mary, you're going to destroy this family." I looked at him as the metal clicked around his wrists. "No, I'm protecting what's left of it." Rachel screamed when they cuffed her, claiming the jewelry was family jewelry, claiming the papers were just copies, claiming Emma was dramatic. But the neighbors had stepped onto their porches by then. The woman across the road, who had brought casseroles after my mother died, watched Rachel being led outside with my mother's necklace sealed in an evidence bag. Charles saw the neighbors. That was when his face finally changed. Not regret. Humiliation. And for people like him, humiliation hurts more than guilt ever could. As the patrol cars pulled away, Officer Thompson stayed behind and asked if we had somewhere safe to stay that night. I looked around my own living room, at the drawers emptied onto the floor, the broken picture frame, the coffee table covered in papers, and realized safety is not just a locked door. Safety is knowing the people outside that door respect your right to keep it closed. "We'll be okay," I said, though my voice sounded older than it had that morning. He handed me a card. "Dr. Mary, this may be more than trespassing. A detective will need to speak with you." I nodded, still holding Emma. I thought the worst part was over. I was wrong. What they had done inside my house was only the surface. The real theft had started months earlier. That night, Emma slept in my bed with the hallway light on and my hand wrapped around hers. Every time a car passed outside, her fingers tightened. I had spent my career stitching strangers back together, but I could not stitch away the sound of my daughter asking, "Is Grandpa coming back?" I told her the truth in the gentlest way I could. "Not tonight. Not without police knowing. And not without me stopping him." She stared at the ceiling. Did I do something wrong? That question hurt worse than anything Charles had said. I turned toward her and said, "No. Adults did something wrong. You were brave, but you should never have been put in that position." She nodded. But children do not heal just because adults finally say the right sentence. Her body still remembered being trapped. Her eyes still moved toward the hallway whenever the floor creaked. By morning, I knew the house needed more than cleaning. It needed proof that it belonged to us again. I changed every lock, canceled every spare key, froze my credit, called my bank, and moved every physical document into a safe deposit box. I took photographs of every drawer, every scratch, every damaged frame, every empty space where something had been taken. By noon, Detective Harris called and asked if I could come to the station. "We found something concerning," she said. "Several things, actually." I already knew it would be bad. I did not know it would be calculated. Rachel's bag had contained a fake notary stamp, unsigned transfer paperwork, and a printed copy of my hospital schedule. My hospital schedule. Not a guess. Not a coincidence. Someone had known exactly when I would be gone. Detective Harris asked who had access to it. I thought of Rachel texting me 2 weeks earlier, asking if I was still working those awful Tuesday doubles. I thought of Charles offering to pick Emma up from school, to help me out, and getting angry when I said no. I thought of the spare key disappearing after Emma's birthday party. All the small moments I had dismissed as annoying suddenly lined up like instruments on a surgical tray. Clean, sharp, ready. Kevin, my attorney and longtime friend, came over that evening and reviewed the police inventory at my kitchen table. He did not soften his words. "Mary, this was not a messy family argument. This looks like attempted fraud, burglary, coercion, theft, and possible identity crime." I sat very still. "They said Rachel needed collateral." Kevin nodded. "That may be the motive. But there's more. Your apartment share is worth far more now than it was when your mother left it to you. I knew the building had appreciated. I did not know how much. Kevin slid a printed valuation across the table. The number made me cold. 7 figures. Not cash in my pocket, not something I could spend tomorrow, but enough equity to make desperate people dangerous. They weren't searching for jewelry, Kevin said. The jewelry was a bonus. They were searching for control. Later that week, Rachel started her second attack. Not in my house this time. Online. She posted a long message about being betrayed by a selfish sister and watching greed destroy a family. She wrote about debts, sacrifices, and how some people forget who raised them when they start making doctor money. She never mentioned Emma. She never mentioned the fake notary stamp. She never mentioned being arrested with my mother's necklace in her purse. Charles called relatives from jail and told them I had sent police after him because I hated being asked to help. My phone filled with messages. Some were cruel, some were cautious. Some asked what really happened. For once, I did not defend myself with paragraphs. I sent one message to the family group chat. I will not discuss an active criminal case. For anyone repeating false claims, my attorney will respond. A child was threatened in my home. Evidence was recovered by police. That is all. Then I attached nothing. No recording, no photos, no emotional speech. Silence did more damage than pleading ever had. People began calling the county clerk. People began checking arrest logs. People began realizing Rachel's story had holes big enough to walk through. Within 48 hours, one cousin apologized. Then an aunt. Then a neighbor who had heard Charles's version at the hardware store knocked on my door with a casserole and red eyes. Rachel deleted her post, but screenshots live longer than lies. Kevin saved everything. That was when the revenge stopped being emotional and became legal. Charles and Rachel had spent years counting on my guilt. Now they were about to meet my documentation. And the thing about documentation is simple. It does not cry, it does not explain, and it does not get manipulated at Thanksgiving dinner. It just waits for the right person to read it out loud. Preparing for court felt strangely familiar. Not because I had ever wanted to be there, but because the process reminded me of surgery. You gather the scans, you study the damage, you identify what can be repaired and what must be removed before it poisons the body. Kevin built our case the same way I built a trauma plan. First, the entry wound, the break-in. Second, internal bleeding, the threats against Emma. Third, hidden damage, the forged documents, fake notary stamp, copied hospital schedule, stolen key, and financial motive. Then came the part that changed everything. Detective Harris obtained messages between Charles and Rachel. I was allowed to read only a portion before court, but it was enough to make my hands go numb. Rachel had written, "If Mary sees Dad upset, she'll just say no. But if Emma is scared, Mary will fold." Charles had replied, "Don't hurt the kid. Just make her understand Mary caused this." I read that line 3 times. Don't hurt the kid. As if terror was not harm. As if making an 8-year-old believe her home could be taken was simply strategy. Kevin watched my face carefully. "Mary, this is why we do not settle quietly," I whispered. I wasn't planning to. Rachel's life began collapsing before the hearing even started. She worked part-time for a property management company and had been trying to get licensed for real estate sales. Once her employer learned she had been arrested with fake property transfer paperwork and a stolen key, she was fired. Charles's church friends stopped repeating his version when the local paper printed the arrest summary. The man who had spent years calling me ungrateful suddenly could not walk into his favorite diner without people lowering their voices. I did not celebrate that, but I did not rescue him from it either. That was the difference. Old Mary would have called someone, explained, softened the story, protected his pride because he's still your father. New Mary looked at Emma sleeping with a nightlight again and understood that protecting a grown man's reputation had cost my child her sense of safety. So I let truth do what truth does when you stop burying it. Before the preliminary hearing, Rachel tried one last time to reach me through a blocked number. I answered because Kevin was sitting beside me and recording with permission. She did not apologize. She cried, but every tear had a hook in it. Mary, please. If this goes forward, I lose everything. I said. You should have thought of that before you searched my bedroom. I was desperate. You terrified my daughter. Dad was the one yelling. And you were the one stealing. Silence. Then the real Rachel surfaced. Mom would be ashamed of you. I looked at my mother's photograph on the mantel, the one Rachel had knocked sideways while searching my room. No, I said. Mom was the one who taught me to keep receipts. Kevin almost smiled. Rachel hung up. That call became evidence of contact after arrest conditions prohibited harassment. Meanwhile, Emma began seeing a child therapist. I asked whether court would traumatize her further. The therapist recommended a recorded child interview instead of forcing her to face Charles and Rachel directly. The prosecutor agreed. Emma sat in a soft room with a trained interviewer and a stuffed fox in her lap. I watched from another room, my heart breaking quietly as she described Charles blocking the hallway and Rachel telling her, "Your mom is ruining everyone." She did not exaggerate. Children rarely need to. The truth sounded small in her voice, which made it unbearable. The prosecutor later told me that Emma's interview would matter because it showed the emotional impact without making the courtroom into another place where adults surrounded her. I thanked her, then went home and sat in Emma's room while she slept, realizing that justice was not only about punishment, it was also about refusing to let a child carry adult shame. The night before court, I found Emma at the kitchen table drawing our house. She drew the front door, the pine trees, my bedroom window, and 2 police cars outside. But she also drew me standing between her and everyone else. "Is that me?" I asked. She nodded. "You were scared too, but you stayed." I sat beside her and said, "Being brave doesn't mean you aren't scared." She looked up. "Does family mean you have to forgive people?" I answered carefully because I knew she would remember it. Forgiveness is personal. Safety is not optional. You can forgive someone someday and still never let them back through your door. That became the sentence I carried into court. Not anger, not revenge for its own sake. Safety, boundaries, consequences. But make no mistake, consequences can look a lot like revenge when people spent years believing they were immune. And Charles and Rachel had believed they were immune because I had made them immune. I had forgiven too quickly, paid too quietly, explained too gently, and protected them from the results of their own choices. Court was the first place where my love for family would no longer be used as evidence against me. The courtroom was smaller than I expected and colder than I wanted. Charles sat beside his public defender, wearing the same gray jacket he wore to funerals, as if this was another tragedy happening to him instead of a consequence created by him. Rachel sat 2 seats away, eyes red, hair perfect, face arranged into injured innocence. When she saw me, she looked down first. That alone told me she was afraid. Not of me, of what I could prove. The prosecutor began with the 911 call. My whisper filled the courtroom. My family broke into my house. They're threatening my daughter. Then came Charles's voice in the background, sharp and ugly, demanding the blue folder. Rachel stared at the table. Charles closed his eyes. Next came the video from my hallway camera, clear enough to show Rachel entering my bedroom with gloves she later claimed were for cleaning. Then the photos. My drawers emptied, jewelry in Rachel's bag, fake notary stamp, transfer forms, my hospital schedule printed with my shift highlighted. By the time Detective Harris read the text message, "If Emma is scared, Mary will fold." The room had gone completely still. I did not look at Rachel then. I looked at the judge. I wanted her to understand that this was not a family disagreement. This was a child used as leverage. When it was my turn to testify, I kept my voice steady. I spoke as a mother, but I also spoke like a surgeon giving a report. What I saw, what I heard, what I did, why I did it. Charles's attorney tried to suggest I had misunderstood because of exhaustion after a long shift. I turned toward him and said, I have worked 20-hour shifts and still known the difference between a family visit and a burglary. A few people in the courtroom shifted. The attorney moved on. Rachel cried during her statement. She said she was overwhelmed, scared of debt, manipulated by Charles, and never intended to hurt Emma. Charles blamed family pressure, financial desperation, and Mary's refusal to communicate. Neither of them said, we were wrong to terrify a child. Neither of them said, we were wrong to steal. Neither of them said, we were wrong to believe Mary's life belonged to us. That absence mattered. The judge noticed. The prosecutor asked for serious restrictions, restitution, and no contact. Kevin sat behind me, one hand resting on the folder that contained years of ignored warnings. Bank transfers I had made to them, messages where they demanded money, screenshots of Rachel's lies, camera logs, repair estimates, therapy recommendations, and my mother's estate documents proving they had no claim to what they tried to take. For years, they had treated paperwork like a weapon they could turn against me. Now paperwork became the wall they could not climb. When the judge spoke, her voice was quiet, but every word landed. She said the court recognized financial stress, but desperation did not create ownership over another person's home, documents, or child. She said family status did not reduce the seriousness of coercion, it increased the betrayal of trust. Then came the consequences. Charles pleaded to felony burglary, attempted extortion, and child endangerment. He received 18 months in county custody, followed by probation, mandatory counseling, restitution, and a 5-year no-contact order protecting both me and Emma. Rachel pleaded to burglary, theft, attempted fraud, and violating contact restrictions. She received a split sentence: jail time, home confinement, probation, restitution, and a permanent mark on the licensing background check she had hoped would start her real estate career. The fake transfer forms were voided. My apartment share was placed under additional legal protection. The court ordered restitution for repairs, legal costs tied to the criminal matter, therapy expenses for Emma, and the appraised value of damaged and stolen property. In the civil case that followed, Kevin secured a judgment that allowed liens against Charles's land and Rachel's remaining assets until repayment was complete. That was the part they never saw coming. They had broken into my house searching for documents that would let them take from me. Instead, the documents I kept took from them. Their excuses, their access, their public image, and a large piece of their financial future. When Charles heard the restitution amount, his shoulders dropped like someone had cut the strings holding him upright. Rachel turned around once, scanning the courtroom as if looking for someone to pity her. Most people looked away. That silence was its own verdict. It was the sound of people finally understanding that being family did not make someone safe, and being exposed did not make someone a victim. After court, an aunt who had sent me a cruel message approached with tears in her eyes. "Mary, I didn't know," she said. "I wanted to say, you didn't ask. Instead, I said, now you do." Emma and I walked out into cold sunlight. She held my hand, but she did not hide behind me this time. "Can they come to our house again?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not legally. Not safely. Not while I'm breathing." She thought about that. "Are we still a family?" I looked at her, at the courthouse steps, at the sky stretching wide over Montana, and I realized the answer was simpler than the pain had made it seem. "Yes," I said. "You and me, and the people who love us without trying to own us." In the months that followed, our home became quiet again, but not the old kind of quiet. Not the quiet where I swallowed anger to keep peace. This was a stronger quiet. Locks changed, cameras updated, papers protected, therapy appointments kept, boundaries enforced. I replaced the broken frame in my bedroom, but I did not replace the illusion that Charles and Rachel could be trusted. I took Emma to school, went back to surgery, cooked simple dinners, and let our lives become ordinary again. Ordinary felt like victory. Some relatives eventually apologized. Some disappeared. Rachel sent one letter through her attorney, not to apologize, but to ask if I would consider reducing restitution because starting over is hard. Kevin responded with one sentence: Dr. Mary declines. Charles never apologized. I stopped waiting. That was another kind of freedom. I did not teach Emma that revenge means cruelty. I taught her that consequences are what happen when truth finally gets witnesses. Charles and Rachel regretted what they did, but not because I screamed louder. They regretted it because I stopped being the person who cleaned up their messes. I stopped mistaking blood for permission. I stopped offering my daughter's safety as the price of family loyalty. And if you were in my place, standing in your own living room while the people who raised you used your child as leverage, what would you choose? Blood or peace?
Thank you for staying with this emotional story until the final moments. All events and characters are fictional and made only for entertainment and educational purposes. We hope it reminds you that forgiveness does not always mean giving someone another chance, and healing does not require you to return to the same people who caused the pain.